at the benefit of the studio, right? There was never going to be a place where I could do that at Blackbird. And so my partner here, Mitch Dane, we had known each other. We had worked on this Jars of Clay records together. We'd known each other at this point for 6 years. He had a room down the street from Blackbird. And my good friend Yakir King had been in there for a couple of years, and he had moved out. He built a studio in his house, and he had a room open. And so Blackbird had a tech that was a asshole. I don't know how best to put it. He was a really caustic human to be around, and it's probably the only person I've ever actually considered murdering.
Careful what you say on tape.
Well, I mean, obviously I didn't do it, and I don't, and I'm not ever going to do it. But when you have people that are really, really that, like, really that into your head, and I was just really trying to do really great work and trying to do the best I could, and he really made things tough. But wow. I did a session. I worked about 3 weeks on a record that was It was a really, really well-financed custom record. Probably brought the studio about $125,000, something like that, in business. Richard Dodd mixed it. It was 3 weeks in our A room, which was, $2,500 a day. And and we finished late on a Sunday night, and I had, and still have, they're in our basement now, my old road racks for my gear, for when I was on the road. And had that in the studio. And this guy, when I came in about noon or so on Monday, because we worked really late on Sunday night. I came in about noon, and he threw a big fit that, he was going to make sure that they billed me for the day because my gear was in here. And it was supposed to be his maintenance day. I mean, we work for the same person, right? It's not like, you know what I mean? Like, why are you? So I just got mad. I just said, fuck you. I unplugged all my shit, threw all the cables in the back, put the lids over, and just rolled all my gear out the front door. And I rolled it out the front door, down to the street, down to the corner, up to the stoplight, down the stoplight. People who know this neighborhood know, down the hill and into Sputnik. And then I walked back, and I got the second rack, and I rolled it down, and I never took my gear back there again. And,
wow.
This wasn't a management thing. It was just this one guy. And then, not long after that, he kind of left, which was great. He talked himself out of his own gig, which was even funnier. And then, but by that point, I had moved into Sputnik, and I had decided that I was going to start working for myself, basically. And the long and short of it is that what really happened, the big thing that happened to me was I had been introduced to Jack White through Patrick Keeler of the Raconteurs. They had come by and done a tour. I gave him a tour one night late, about 3 hours. It's about a 3-hour deal to go all through Blackbird. It's very intense, Yeah. And
I've seen pictures of some of those rooms.
Yeah, I worked there every day, so I knew every in and every out. And so Jack had decided he wanted to do what became Icky Thump there with Joe Chigrilli, the great Joe Chigrilli. And so I was around for that, but I was just lurking around. And one day he came out and asked me a question, and I said, he asked me about a piece of gear, and I was like, well, Blackbird doesn't have that, but I do at my studio. And he goes, why do you have a studio? And I'm like, because you're in this one. He's like, oh, I get it. I get it. I'm like, yeah, I can't do this like with your hair, so I need a place of my own. And he's like, where's it at? I told him where it was. And then like a few months later, he just stopped by one day and then asked me to do a record or work on a record with him and Danger Mouse, which became the Rome record, which is a beautiful record, by the way. And so that was interesting because we did everything on tape, but of course, Danger Mouse doesn't work on tape. So we took, he brought me a CD. It was great. He brought a CD of the 2 mixes. I put that on 2 tracks of an 8-track 2-inch head. We had an 8-track 2-inch head. And then I basically recorded Jack's vocals and I recorded them with the effects because we really liked what was going on. Like, it fit in the mix. It was great. So I printed all that to tape, and then I did all this. All this was done to time code, so it was locked. And then I transferred those files back, and then he just dropped them right back into his program, which I think at the time he was using Acid, to be honest with you. But so yeah, and then I did another thing for Jack. I did a remix, a Spanish language remix of a song. And then just out of the blue, that Christmas, it was 23rd of December, he just called me and asked me if I wanted to mix the Raconteurs record, which was Consolers the Lonely. And Joe was working on the record. I thought Joe was mixing it. But there had been some acrimony of some sort about something. I don't exactly know what it was about. And they had decided that they wanted to have somebody else mix it. And then Jack had just done these dates with me, and he basically just called and asked me if I wanted to do it. And that was a big, huge break. And then that record went on to win Best Digital Unit Album, which I shared with Joe. I mean, to be honest with you.
That record sounds amazing.
Thank you. Well, to be honest with you, I mean, Joe Ciccarelli is amazing. So yeah, I'm glommed onto him, glommed onto his recording. It's a really great recording. But it was, now, first of all, I want to sound really humble, but I also want to say it's 32 track analog record. It's 216 track 2 inches. So, it's a handful of things to sort of manage to mix, but it was fun. It was a fun project. We did that whole record. I think I mixed the whole thing in about 8 days. And then we spent a couple days of recalls, a couple record a few things, and then a day of sequencing the record, like working out the sequence. And then we had about a half a day of playing it for the president of Warner Brothers in Studio D with the monitors wide open, which was pretty amazing, because they'd last about 4, 5, 6 minutes before the amps had shut down. So he finally had to okay, Jack, we have to turn it down a little bit, But yeah. I think I did the whole thing in 14 days.
Well, Jack White is clearly a visionary, so he must have seen, something in you that he wanted to keep, and continue working with you afterwards.
Yeah, strangely, I'm one of the few people he had never worked with anybody more than one record ever. He worked with Joe on 2, and then I did 8.5 years with him. So, yeah. I think back to earlier what we said is I'm fast. He's not someone he doesn't. I mean, he's not. I'm not saying he's not patient. I'm just saying he likes to strike while the iron's hot, for sure.
That makes a lot of sense. So, and I guess that's probably been the reason why you guys continue working on just whatever idea he has. You're just like on it, done.
Yeah. Well, that was kind of that was kind of what worked out for us. That the bummer with Jack. I love working with Jack. He's great. I do. But we haven't really worked on a lot of stuff. We did the last Raconteurs record, Help Me Stranger. That was a couple of years ago. But I actually got too busy for him, because he's like sometime in 2015, I would say, somewhere in there, 2015, 2016, he called me. He's like, hey, that record we started, which was Lazaretto, like, I'd like to finish it. I'm like, cool. He goes, can you come over today? Like, I can't even come over this month, And so that's kind of how Jack works. And so he had my old assistant, Josh Smith, on the road with him. And I said, why don't you call Josh? Maybe he can help you. And it just ended up, Josh just stepped into that role, which is great. It's fine.
That's awesome.
So,
yeah, I guess with these like super artist types, they kind of, when the iron's hot, kind of like you were saying, like they have a creative burst, they got to just do it right then and there.
Yep.
And you can't always predict. They're not the most predictable types.
A good friend of mine, Nico Bolas, told me a story. It's like a parable of sorts, but it's a true story. It happened to him. He worked for Neil Young for about 12 years. So he did like the Rockabilly record. He did Trans. He did Rockin' in the Free World. He did all these records, right? And he said to me one time, he said, I had this great client. I made all these records, and then they repossessed my house. And I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, well, the artist decided at some point that he wanted to use somebody else. And I had just spent 12 years as him being my only client. He goes, don't let that happen to you. And so what I did was I worked at Blackbird in the morning. I went to Jackson in the afternoon and early evening. And then I went to Sputnik till about midnight. And I did that for probably 5 years.
Wow.
Well, I would say about 4 years for sure.
You were working around the clock.
In 2008, 2009, 2010, I was doing that all through there. And then in 10, I left Blackbird. And so then it was just Sputnik during the day, then Jax, and then back, and then a lot of Jackson, up through about 2015. We
Things
sort
got a
of
bit easier.
We sort of stopped working together there 2014, 15, because he was out on the road. So he went out on the road for like a year and a half, and I was like, okay, well, I gotta go do my own thing. And then he came back and wanted to work, and I was like, too busy. Right.
So it was really smart that you did you decided to be like, totally self-employed, totally freelance. Cause that
it was a scary.
It was good and bad, right? Yeah,
it was
like
good
everything.
and bad. I loved working at Blackbird. I loved the building. I loved, John's great and the people were good and all that. But I wasn't, I was an enabler of other people's dream. You know what I mean? I was enabling people every day to be doing the thing that I wanted to do. And that wasn't enabling me. So I needed to get out. I probably should have done it a couple of years earlier than I did.
Yeah.
But I left there in 2010.
Yeah.
Midway 2010.
Well, clearly you've done great work since then.
Thanks.
I do want to keep going, talking about Jack White, because I feel like, I don't know, he's just such an interesting character. He's kind of known for being anti-production. How do you find that happy medium?
I wouldn't say he's anti-production. I would say the thing is with Jack is that it has to be real. It's funny. He asked me one time, he was talking about this Beck record and he's like, how does this sound so big? I go, well, this is like 100 tracks, Jack. We record on 8, And he's like, well, what do you mean when you say 100 tracks? I go, yeah, there's all kinds of stuff going on here. I mean, there's a lot of data here. We're recording on 8 tracks, we can't do this, on 8 tracks. I mean, but that's why people buy your records. They love that, so it's kind of one of those weird things. It wasn't really until the last couple of years I was there that we ever even had a Pro Tools system in the building. And the only reason we had it is because Jack was going to do this score for this movie. He was going to do the soundtrack. And they had to have Pro Tools files. So we were doing the soundtrack stuff on tape and then locking it to timecode, putting timecode on the tape, and then locking Pro Tools and transferring it back. So that whatever they did, we had an analog version of it that could be used in the movie, laying it back analog. And so, but then the whole thing went awry and Jack didn't do the soundtrack. But what he did do is he kept all that music. And so a couple of those songs became hits. One of them was, I Want You to Fight for My Love, which is on Lazaretto. That was from that session. And the other is, the Don't Hurt Yourself that Beyonce did. That's also from that session, several years later. But, Jack, cool. I think Jack, given like using Pro Tools or something like that, I think he'd probably, maybe, I don't know that he would ever say this, but he really wants everything to be really perfect. And so he would probably make things perfect instead of trying to get the performance, because that's the thing with tape. You have to get the performance. You can make 9 million tape edits, but we're doing 8 track and we're recording at 7.5, which is really slow. And so, tape edits are hard. You have to cover them up usually. You have to figure out some way to cover them up. I did hundreds of tape edits working on Blunderbuss, the two Dead Weather records, Whorehound, and Sea of Cowards. Sea of Cowards is by far the hardest technical record I've ever made.